Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 95.
Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast with your host, Jack Mountain Bushcraft School founder and Master Maine Guide, Tim Smith.
I'm your host, Tim Smith. I'm a registered Master Maine Guide and have been a full-time outdoor instructor and guide since founding the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School in 1999. We help people become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more confident in the natural world through our bushcraft and guide training semester programs and multi-week canoe and snowshoe expeditions. You can check out the show notes to all of our podcasts at blog.jackmtn.com. If you're interested in learning more about our college-accredited and GI Bill-approved programs, visit the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School on the web at jackmtn.com. And check out our online network and digital learning academy at bushcraftschool.com. Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 95. Today, our topic is minimalism in the wild. Tim Smith and Christopher Russell here.
Hello, hello.
Coming from the communications level of our semi-subterranean North Maine Woods layer.
I did it. For the last 3 times you said that, I've been trying not to laugh, and I did it.
Yeah.
I did it.
Good for you.
I did it.
Good for you.
Small victories.
We're going to talk about why and how to go minimalist when you're out on the land. But before we get there, a bit of current events. Number 1, the Autumn Woodsman course coming up in early November here at the field school in Masardis, Maine. We still have, I believe we have 3 spots available, 3 spots still remaining. Purpose of the Autumn Woodsman course is a cold weather introduction when there's not 8 feet of snow on the ground and it's not, 30 below zero. So learning the skills of how to navigate cold weather without all the challenges that come with excessive snow and the sort of the jeopardy that comes with the bitter cold of midwinter. So if you're looking to learn something about how to live in the cold, from canvas tents and shelters and fires to axe use to even off-grid cabins and things, the Autumn Woodsman might be a good fit for you. It's a fun program. No bugs.
That is, I like that. That's sort of becoming the defining. Whenever people think about living in the wild, it's all it's always, aren't the animals a pain? Isn't the cold a pain? And it's no. The thing that drives your life living outdoors is bugs. It's always
northern
bugs.
Maine in June and July.
Yeah, it's all you think about.
Thankfully, we've got like 10 months without them.
Yeah, but then you spend the other 10 months thinking about how great it is to not have. Like they're insidious.
Yeah, when they're bad, they're real bad.
Oh, jeez.
I don't want to sound like... I think it's been kind of a theme with us the last few episodes where we whine about the bugs, and I don't want people to have that as the takeaway. But they're pretty rugged, and if you're not planning for them, then, yeah, they can make your life real hard.
Life's tough.
Life can be tough. So, Autumn Woodsman coming up. If you're interested, get in touch. Spots won't last. Next.
Yeah, the other thing is that I ran the first weekend of the very first ever Freelance Leaf Forest program down in Vermont. It was the first big program I've ever run at the sort of School of the Forest campus, which was really cool. It was a really fun weekend. People got to, spin bow drills and see all the kind of cooking systems for living well outdoors, as well as learn a little bit about axe use. And we still have a couple more spots. I think I'll probably take people up until that 3rd weekend, because after that...
When is that? Like, what's the 3rd weekend?
That 3rd weekend will be November. The 3rd weekend in November. So until
the 3rd weekend is the 3rd weekend in November.
Whoa.
Wow.
I hadn't thought about that.
Like conspiracy theories are just they're going nuts in my head right now. There's all sorts of bells going on.
Understandably so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if people are still interested in that and waiting to pull the trigger, up until that 3rd weekend, I'll take people. But after that, it'd be too hard to get people caught up.
Yeah. And we just returned from a trip into the North Maine Woods, kind of a ultralight or improvised gear-based trip.
Yeah, an ultralight in the sense that it was, we'll get into
that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, it was a really good trip. Myself and our teaching assistant B took everybody out, and I paddled out. I paddled everybody's food out, and they kind of did a big hike around the lake that we were at to the campsite, and with very as minimal gear as they could get, and then spent a few nights out with that system, which is great. The infrastructure here is. There's a little bit of it now, so you get not complacent, but you get comfortable, and so it's nice to shake that up a little bit.
Yeah. So, okay, let's just jump right into it. That we often discuss camping by canoe, like traditional gear, heavy canvas tents.
Yeah.
And then in the wintertime, we'll often be talking about camping by snowshoe and toboggan. So if you're hauling your stuff on a toboggan, if you've done it a couple of times and you're reasonably fit, you should be able to haul roughly your own weight on a toboggan. One person can haul their own weight on a toboggan. In a canoe, one person, if it's a big canoe, you can carry 800, 1,000 pounds pretty simply. I'm not talking about carrying around waterfalls or anything like that, but, just regular water. You can carry a ton of weight. So I think we had the discussion with one of our current students where when we were talking about an improvised gear trip, kind of going ultralight, he said, I never heard you guys talk about this or discuss this because it's always, all the extra weight that you can carry by canoe or by toboggan. And it's true. I don't know if we have any experience on the podcast talking about going ultralight or going with minimal stuff.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit, but we kind of usually refer to them as like primitive overnights and stuff like that, where you go down with just stuff you've made yourself, and those are always great experiences. But I don't think people. We don't often do or talk about the trips that we go on where we're trying to take as little as we can.
Yeah, but that is a big part of what we do here. Last summer, the Advanced Boreal Forest Summer Survival Course, that was the whole point of the course, was to sort of prep people to make the stuff they need and then take off into the forest, with minimal stuff. And by minimal stuff, a few simple tools, axe, knife, metal pot, and a piece of tarp or some other, windproof, waterproof
way to
thing
light
that
a
you can
fire.
set up. So, the idea is, and I think it's important to define some terms here before we go any further. We're talking about not necessarily ultralight. When we talk about ultralight, that's usually very gear-based with specialized gear, and it's usually super expensive because it's made out of titanium and other unobtainium and other obtainiums.
Tim, that's not a real thing.
Unobtainium, we can't get it.
Because it's not a real thing.
No, it's because we can't get it. It's not obtainable.
I can't get Santa Claus either, Tim. I've been trying, but I'm slowly starting to accept that
You're
he's
just
just
shopping
not
in the
real.
wrong places.
The Halloween aisle.
So for our purposes for this podcast, ultralight is not something that we do a lot of, just because we don't have a lot of the ultralight backpacking stuff. We're much more engaged with the improvised or sort of do-it-yourself when we're talking about ultralight.
Yeah, there's a difference between carrying all the same gear, but that gear is made lighter, versus not carrying the gear you don't really need. Like minimizing the stuff that you bring along, because you know that the ability and knowledge that you've kind of built up over the years will serve you just as well as having all that fancy stuff that it weighs half an ounce. And
instead of cutting your toothbrush in half and having this thing weighs 0.001 ounces.
Yeah.
The idea is to take the minimum kit and then let the forest provide the rest of it. So, for example, we often see, heading into like a backcountry area, there's always some entrepreneurial person who at the end of their driveway has a big sign that says Campwood.
Yeah.
$5 a bundle, right?
Mm-hmm. And they do pretty well.
They do pretty well. Obviously, we're against that because you don't want to transport firewood. That's where bugs and bad pests get moved around. But, if I'm going to the forest, which is loaded with wood. I know there's some certain places you can't cut dead standing, and that's pretty much anywhere other than Maine or Canada. But, if it's loaded with wood, I'm not going to bring wood there. Like,
right.
if I lived in Kansas and I was going on a vacation to the Maine coast, I'm not going to bring like a bucket of salt water from Kansas to the Maine coast, because there's plenty of salt water when I get there. So the idea is that if I'm going to the woods, there's usually plenty of wood in the woods. Hence the name.
Yeah, well, it's just this idea of not having to bring. I'm really losing that. Just this idea that with building up a sort of knowledge base of the ecosystem that you're moving in, you start to realize that you need less and less stuff. And I think that's a great experience to have. These students spend weeks and weeks living in the same ecosystem, and then when you go out into a place where there isn't, an infrastructure like a well or clearly designated trees to be cut for firewood, they can still kind of really easily ID all the stuff that they need to get through the day, which is, I think, kind of the whole point of bushcraft or wilderness living or whatever you want to call it. It's not about bringing a propane stove with you. It's about knowing how to not fashion a propane stove, but achieve that same result through a few simple tools and a knowledge of the landscape.
Right. I would think ultralight would be like, bring a propane stove, but it only weighs 0.7 pounds
and
or
costs
something.
$8 million.
Right. So that's the difference, is interacting with the landscape on a meaningful level. And you've heard us discuss this in the past with the idea of lowering your baseline or resetting your baseline. That if your baseline consists of spending meaningful time in the forest with the clothes on your back and a couple of simple tools, that's a different experience than if you're traveling by 60-foot motorhome sort of a thing, where, all of the comforts of home. And then, the ultralight, yes, they are not in an ultra giant motorhome, but, often they will have just scaled down lighter versions of sort of extraneous.
Yeah, it's still gear dependent. Whereas I don't think we're as gear dependent. Like ultralight is you're pretty reliant on that stuff not breaking.
Right.
Whereas with us, it's, if your axe breaks, you carve a new handle and you put it on there. There's a lot less requirements for outside not influence, but outside sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Outside
stuff.
Yep, outside stuff.
Things.
Yeah, well, it's true. Like there's not a big need for any input from the outside in our way of going about life in the woods.
Yeah, and let's say you do break an axe. I think, and I will say where I heard this term in 1995, the first time I ever met Mors Kahansky. At the time, people were very interested in, doing without certain pieces of kit. And I'll never forget that I said, hey, Mors, what's your opinion on somebody going out into the woods without an axe? And obviously Mors was from Alberta, so northern forest sort of a thing. We're not talking about going into like the desert without an axe, where maybe an axe is completely extraneous, but where you're going to be working wood a lot. And never forget what he told me. He said, perhaps the best way to learn how to get by without an axe is to become really good with an axe. And then when you have mastered the axe, then you'll know what it takes to sort of get by without it, because you'll know exactly what it needs to accomplish. So I think that's a really interesting way of figuring out how to get by without something, is to master whatever tool that is. So how do you get by without an axe? How do you get by without a knife? If you had neither of those, and maybe you're going to pick up rocks that you could break into where they will have a sharp edge, even if you know very minimal stuff about flint knapping and making stone knives and things, you can still smash a couple of rocks together and get an edge that's sharp enough to maybe carve a notch for a bow drill or clean a trout or something like that.
Yeah, and I think I think this last trip we went on was sort of an example of that, because, they didn't, the idea was for them to not bring tents. They brought tarps, and if we had done this week 2, people would have been pretty unhappy most of the time. But after having built 2 different shelters and spent 4 nights in each, they knew a little bit about what they needed to be comfortable, and with just a tarp and some rope, they could make something that they stayed fairly warm and dry in. We kind of planned this trip around having the second day be, it was a deluge. It was so much rain coming down, and a lot of these people were just on the ground under tarps and still with just their understanding that they had learned from the shelter building. They were warm and, you know, maybe a little uncomfortable, but not nearly as miserable as they would have been had they not spent time in natural shelters previous. So having mastered those, it was a lot easier for them to kind of laterally think and solve problems.
Wait a minute. It's almost like you're trying to tell me that knowing something useful is more important than owning specialized gear.
Not almost. That's exactly what I'm trying to tell. I'm not even trying to tell you. I am just telling you that.
We live in a consumer-based society. Like, you're going to throw this monkey wrench in. You could put Walmart out of business with crazy ideas like that.
No, I couldn't.
What are you, crazy?
No, I couldn't. No. No way could I put them out of business. We're going to get sued.
So notice the title for this episode is Minimalism in the Wild. In the Wild. We got to use that kind of scary, macho. It's from an ad we heard.
We're very scary and macho.
It's from an ad we heard for a specific product that we won't mention because we don't want to get sued. But just goofy as hell, right?
It was pretty, we've had some good laughs about it.
But notice we didn't call it bushcraft in the wild because the way, I think the original term of bushcraft...
It's Walmart now. Bushcraft is Walmart.
Bushcraft is no longer really in the mainstream, if you will. Yeah. I don't think bushcraft is about a meaningful, visceral relationship to the land. Kind of what the term has been co-opted to mean now is like specialized gear, but not necessarily like... ultralight gear. It's a whole different realm of gear. That's why we didn't call it bushcraft. Minimalist bushcraft. I don't know if that term exists. It's like jumbo shrimp or honest politician, right? It's just made up and doesn't really exist anywhere.
That's some insight there.
Yeah,
but it's true. It's, you know, I'm sure there are plenty of people that I don't know what you would call it, practitioners of bushcraft that probably have a meaningful relationship with the land.
Right,
but the overarching culture of it now is very
is gear based.
Do I get a patch? I get a patch?
It's about the gear.
Yeah, which is, you know,
it's become about stuff, and that's too bad. Because in my definition, bushcraft has always been about doing something. It's never been about buying something. But these days, it seems to be more about buying stuff and having the right look and the right gear. And
our former instructor Ben had a great story where he went to a wilderness medicine course, and they needed to make a litter, and a lot of the people with him were kind of they hadn't done a lot of like living simply in the woods and stuff like that. And so to make a litter, he went and started cutting saplings down with his knife by bending them and applying tension. And the only question anybody asked him was what kind of knife he was using to do that. And I think it was just a pocket knife. Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
But that's it, right? It's like what knife do I need to cut down saplings? You don't need to.
What gear do I need to engage with the land?
You don't.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Well,
I could gnaw through it with my teeth.
It's only 99% of human history that we didn't have all the modern specialized crappy gear that's out there. So, you know, for that 0.001% of human history, yes, we have needed that.
Do you think?
And I'm not that good with numbers or math.
Do you think that Paleolithic people that didn't like jump to the new kind of chert that somebody had found got made fun of?
Yes. On Instagram.
We're a horrible species.
Always Instagram. Have been. But, you know, the big overarching point is that it's good to get out on the land with minimal stuff. It's a worthwhile exercise.
Yeah.
You know, it lowers your baseline. And if you're somebody who, say, can go out and make yourself comfortable in a forest environment, you know, with a knife, an axe, metal pot, a piece of tarp, like, yeah, your baseline's pretty low. There's not a whole lot that the world can take away from you and, like, make your life really unhappy. But if you need that 60-foot RV and they take that away and maybe you only have a 40-foot RV and you spend the rest of your life bitching about, this RV sucks. I wish I had the bigger RV, you know, then life's kind of hard then. And, you know, the goal should be, number one, to have a realistic and visceral relationship with the land around you, but also should be like, you know, we go out and do these things so that life is easy, not to make life hard.
Yeah, so I have two separate thoughts about what you just said. The first is that, you know, we were out on a gorgeous series of lakes in the North Maine Woods. We were out there kind of living pretty simply, doing a lot of hiking around and stuff like that. But it's also grouse season right now, so there were people driving up and down the woods roads.
Truck hunting, bub.
Yeah, truck hunting, and Tim's joking about RVs so much because we saw a lot of RVs parked where people would park their RV and stay for the weekend and walk up and down the ridge roads.
Walk?
Oh,
What,
yeah,
are you
exactly.
kidding me? No one walks.
Drive the RV in with the truck, drop it off, and then get in the truck to go hunting. Which, okay, if that's the way you're doing it, you're doing it.
Yeah, at least they're getting out.
But we hiked, and I paddled my stuff in, and I got 15 feet from a giant flock of 15 loons that are getting ready to migrate for the winter. On our hike up this mountain to a fire tower, we got probably 3 feet from a grouse and got to listen to a mom and dad beaver swimming around, talking to the kids that were inside the lodge still. And those experiences don't happen. They don't happen if you're, what do they call it? Engine hunting or truck hunting or whatever.
Yeah, truck hunting.
It's just not a reality. You go, you shoot your bird, you climb back into your truck, and then you listen to whatever's on the wacky French station on the radio, I love the wacky French station on the radio, but but it's not the same. If I'm going to go out, I want to really have I want to be as quiet as everything else while I'm out and about. And I think our way of camping lends itself to that a lot better.
Yeah, and you don't have to camp that way all the time, but there's a huge benefit in doing it from time to time, right?
Yeah.
To reestablish that baseline as being very low.
Well, and that was kind of the second thing I was thinking was, we're talking about baselines, and we talked about people sleeping under tarps and stuff, and they were sort of a little, I wouldn't say nervous, but sort of, it was a new way of doing things that they haven't done yet on the course to go out on this trip. And then whether they knew it or not, that lowered their baseline. And then at least the people in my truck on the way home, all they talked about was how excited they were to get back into their hoop houses that they've been living out of. And, I'd be willing to bet that if you told those people 6 weeks ago that their like big upgrade from a weekend out was going to be to go back and sleep on a bunch of cut stripped logs with grass on top of it, they would have looked at you like you were crazy. But because they had a somewhat rough night under a tarp while it was pouring down rain, now the idea of the hoop house seems like a huge upgrade.
Luxury.
An absolute luxury. And it is. Like,
yeah, it's a great way to live.
Yeah, and that's a gorgeous thing. We had one student who put his spot down in a place that, he got a little damp, and so he wasn't super cold or anything, but he just wasn't super comfortable. And then as soon as he woke up, he spent the rest of the day talking about how excited he was to just crawl back into his little tarp covered cave and go to sleep. And that's awesome to me. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get back and I'm going to go have like a fancy bath with soap and stuff like that. It was just the idea of crawling into a thing that he made to be warmer. And it's so simple, but it's so powerful.
What's that? Is that like Spanish for like smelling salts or something?
It's like soup, but you can't eat it.
Why not?
I'll tell you later.
So there's a quote that I've heard numerous times over the years, and it goes something like, "I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it." And there's a lot of wisdom in that quote, right? But what it usually leads to, practically speaking, is people just bringing way too much stuff. So yes, if we're traveling by canoe and if I'm paddling solo in a 20-footer, I can carry tons of stuff, but that doesn't mean I need to have all that stuff. Obviously, if you're camping traditionally, canvas tents, bringing a wood stove like this time of year, that stuff weighs a lot. But it doesn't mean that I'm also going to bring 8 toothbrushes that have been sawn in half, and kind of crappy minimalist versions of regular gear. Maybe it's better for me to just leave some of that stuff out and not bring it.
I haven't carried a toothbrush in years.
Yeah, and it's obvious why. Because you have really straight, good teeth.
Aww.
See how I tried to rescue that?
See how I used the same syllable to imply different emotions in that?
No, I didn't see that. I might have heard it.
I couldn't. You're too quick for me, Tim. You're too quick.
But just that bit, I'd rather have it and not need it. Yeah, so let's all then, buy like tractor trailers and load them up with gear. And
Done.
then have all of that crap there waiting
Sold.
to go.
You had me at trailer.
The downside is, with that approach, is that at some point you spend all your time dealing with the stuff. And when you're dealing with the stuff all the time, you don't have any time to build that relationship with the land.
Yep.
Right? Because you're just like, I got to maintain this and take care of that and do this. And that's, in my mind, that's a huge negative. And, I'm not saying that everybody out there in podcast land needs to pitch all of their stuff and just go out, wearing like a loincloth and
Done.
and do whatever with, with no material culture. But I will make the claim that if you have too much stuff, it becomes all about the stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a negative because, we go out and we recreate to, number one, blow off steam from our, the modern world and, have that build that relationship with the land and feel like we belong somewhere. Not necessarily to become the caretaker of like 5,000 individually packaged pieces of gear.
Yeah. And to me, kind of broader picture here, if you're going into the woods to escape the modern life, maybe your modern life could use a little bit of parsing down, right? Like we have so much stuff in the modern world and, maybe a little bit of the woods creeps back into your home where you're like, do I really need like 8 different ways to make coffee? No, I don't.
Like 12 then?
Yeah. You're really helping me make this argument here. But there's something to that, right? Like the more time you spend in the woods and the more that baseline is lowered, the more you kind of start to see how much just random nonsense you have at home that you could get rid of.
Right.
Like
We have a saying around camp is base camp heavy, travel light. Meaning don't try to live that minimalist lifestyle if you're coming to the field school for like a 9-week program. Bring whatever you need or want to be comfortable, right? But also be prepared when we head out, into the woods or away from camp. Be prepared to go pretty light then. So you don't need to bring everything with you in that instance. So, and also, I like we've said before, I believe that every now and then it's very beneficial to you as a person just to go really light, to see what you can eliminate. Because there's always, if we went the other way, like, hey, let's try adding something new. Let's try adding more gear to our kit. There's always a new piece of kit. There's always something shiny. Mm-hmm. And, we all want it. We're having this discussion. But if I see something in a catalog and I'm like, oh, God, I want that so bad. And, but just the idea that you don't need it. It doesn't hurt to get it. There's nothing wrong with getting gear, wanting gear, owning good gear. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when that becomes the sole focus of why you go out.
Yeah.
All the sort of YouTube channels where the guy's like, I'm going to go out and test my gear, right? Like, well, I don't know. Those kind of rub me the wrong way.
Yeah.
But you're not really testing it if you're not having an authentic woods experience, right? You're just sort of kind of sitting in your backyard, following the directions that came with it.
Yeah, and there's also, for me it always weirdly goes back to canoeing, where every time I get a new piece of kit of some kind, I have to think about, because I'm lazy. Like I don't want to portage more than I have to, and I don't want to have to make more trips. So if it doesn't fit into like basically the 4 bags or barrels that I bring all the time, it doesn't go with me.
You could follow. Who's that guy on the Outside Online article? He said the key to portaging is to
bring 3 people.
Yeah, bring 3 people
and
for
it's
one
like,
boat. Maybe you got too much stuff there, bud.
Yeah, I would just rather parse my stuff into the bare minimum and be able to take it all in one go.
Yeah. But it's it's something that we're all guilty of, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like the sort of the older you are, the more years you spent kicking around like the woods or woodsy stuff or camping or guiding or whatever. We all sort of probably started out as kids and you're running around in the backyard.
We all definitely started out as kids, Tim.
Well, we started out as babies.
Well, we started out as zygotes.
That was the what was the Rodney Dangerfield in Easy Money. The mother-in-law is like, he started out like as a doctor and now he owns his own hospital. And Rodney Dangerfield says, I started out as a baby and now I'm a baby photographer. It's so good. if you've never seen Easy Money and you like Rodney Dangerfield, it's worth a watch. Anyway,
I'm so sorry I did
most kind of woodsy people, you start out as a kid and you got nothing. Maybe your grandfather gave you like a pocket knife, or you bought one or something, and then you're out there in the wild and all you got is your little knife and you're super happy. Flash forward 20 years.
30 knives.
And you got a barn.
Not enough belt loops to hold them all.
You don't have enough barn space to hold all the crap that you've... and this has happened to me. Right? You don't have enough space in the barn to house all the stuff that you've accumulated over the years. Granted, in my case, because we run courses and things, often I'll come across like a pile of sticks in the barn. I'm like, why are these in here? Because it was somebody's project that they abandoned, and I'm, can't burn them fast enough at that point. But, you start off as a kid improvising and interacting with the land, and eventually you're that adult with too much stuff, right? It just happens, something here, something there. If you're bringing in maybe one piece of kit a year and you're not purging one piece of kit a year, at year 2, you have twice as much stuff as you did at year 1, and it continues like that exponentially.
I thought you said earlier in the podcast you weren't good at math.
What? Yeah, I'm not. Anyway, it's a common thing, but we encourage you to get out and not have a ton of gear. And I think it's common enough that I was looking through an old book of Robert Service's poetry, and he has a poem in there about the joy of being poor. And in the poem, there's 2 old rich guys with too much stuff, and they're talking about or reminiscing about how awesome it was in their younger days when they could go out on the land and all they had between them was like a hobo's satchel and a loaf of bread or something. And weren't those great days? And it's a great poem. You can find it online. Probably worth a read.
We'll link to it in the show notes. How about that?
Yeah, how about that? But, just the idea that there's certain things that are lost from the experience when you're inundated with too much stuff. And that's kind of the big overarching point of what we're talking about today is that, to have that, to build that visceral relationship with the land, it's more challenging to do if you have too much stuff, if you're too inundated with stuff.
Yeah, it just kind of, it gets in the way. I mean, it's sort of weirdly fitting. Like, you kind of can't see the forest for the trees, right? You're too hung up on the individual little pieces of the kit and how they function, and you miss out on a mom and dad beaver talking to their kits, right?
Yeah. Wait.
I don't know why
they're kits? Like beavers are carrying kit? They're like naked swimming around.
No, kit. Small beavers are called kits.
Oh, okay. I'm following now. Again,
I felt like that was really good, and then I ran into a brick wall.
So again, there's nothing wrong with having gear. Gear's awesome, but don't let the gear become the focus.
Yeah, let the gear assist you into having a meaningful relationship with the land rather than you having a meaningful relationship with your kit.
And
a beaver kit.
And every now and then it's useful to see how little you can have with you and still be comfortable, still be happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Because that kit will mean a lot more to you after you've lived without it. Like, as soon as I lost my pet beaver kit, it just really, it was really hard. And it was only because I had a meaningful relationship built up with it.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're done.
I guess we're done. Thank you very much for listening, spending this time with us. We hope you enjoyed this. You know the drill. If you like this, share it with somebody. Leave us a review. And we'll hit you back again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. You have been listening to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. For more information on our professional wilderness guide training programs that are college accredited and GI Bill approved, visit us on the web at jackmtn.com.